Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining me in this online class on the exciting subject of how to naturally shrink and heal hemorrhoids. My name is Khabir Southwick. I'm in private practice for 27 years. I'm an Ayurvedic doctor and herbalist and the owner of herbmanteas.com, the sponsor of today's class. And today we're going to talk about the causes of hemorrhoids, the necessary diet for hemorrhoids, and some home remedies you can do, and of course, herbal treatments that can help you reverse this condition right away. First, I just want to say that, being in private practice, I have multiple hemorrhoid cases per week. Now, most people don't book the appointment for hemorrhoids. They usually book the appointment for a more serious condition, diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol, kidney failure, etc., or arthritis, joint pain. Pain will generally get somebody to book an appointment, or gallbladder problems. Is it pain? That's what really motivates people to take care of their health. But they don't book for the hemorrhoids. At least I don't remember anybody having, but I see it a lot on my intake form where people check it, and then I want to treat it, and most people don't even want to treat it. They're just like, yeah, it's all right. It comes and goes, and, it's not bleeding now. It's not hurting now. I go, okay, when was the last time that it hurt? Oh, like a few weeks ago. When was the last time it was bleeding? Last month. So it's like still ongoing, and the people just kind of accept it. I think this is one of the largest mistakes that we can make with our health, and that's accept the health problems. I mean, I guess being in denial could be a worse attitude than just kind of accepting it. Maybe accepting it's a little better than being in denial and not even saying you have a health issue. But they're kind of close. I think for people with arthritis, they'll just think, well, I mean, pain is part of getting old. Women urinate at night 3 or 4 times, and they think, oh, that's part of aging. Men have no libido. They think it's part of aging, and they just accept these problems. I see it all the time. And hemorrhoids is definitely in that category where people just accept it. They don't ever ask me for a treatment. They don't book the appointment for it, hemorrhoids, even though it's very annoying and very painful, and it can be very tricky to get rid of, and it's actually very easy to treat. In fact, if you take notes on this class and follow the diet that I recommend, and could purchase the herbal products, inexpensive herbal products that can reverse it, including the hemorrhoid formula. People say, God, that formula works so good. Oh, where'd you get it? And I go, hey, it's ancient formula. They had hemorrhoids thousands of years ago. So they knew what to do. It's nothing new. But I will say that you could treat yourself without an appointment with me if you take notes and follow my advice and get a few of these herbal products. So that's the good news. It's 100% treatable, easily treatable. And it can create complications, though. I mean, for example, it can just create anemia, just a little bleeding. Constant small amounts of bleeding can lead to anemia. You may not think that little blood on the toilet paper is the end of the world, but if it's daily, you're losing blood and you can be anemic, and that can make you fatigue and weak and lower oxygen levels to the body, etc. So, and of course, the pain can be painful and take the enjoyment out of having a nice bowel movement. And of course, it could get worse. It could flare up. And a lot of times people with hemorrhoids have inflammatory colon too. I get a lot of cases with IBS and irritable bowel that also have hemorrhoids. So it's like an inflammation in different areas of the colon. Sometimes people have, irritable bowel, inflammatory colon, and inflammatory muscles like fibromyalgia, inflammatory joints like joint pain, arthritis, and then also hemorrhoids. So you can see that all these are inflammatory conditions. All are painful. Their muscles are painful. Their joints are painful. Their colon is painful, and the hemorrhoid is painful. So, a lot of times I'll treat all these conditions and the hemorrhoid just goes away. So it is somewhat an inflammatory condition. So let's talk about the causes. The causes are, let's just say, constipation. Now, most cases, let's say 90% of cases, roughly. Now, you can also have like inflammatory colon condition where you're getting a lot of, let's say aggressive diarrhea and loose stools. And that can also kind of lead to hemorrhoids where it becomes inflamed, kind of more of an internal hemorrhoid where it's inflamed and painful and it starts bleeding. And the same person has internal colon inflammation and usually in the descending colon, and they have irritable bowel. So you can have like, you know, aggressive diarrhea and inflammation in the colon can also create a hemorrhoid. But those are more the internal hemorrhoids. And of course, the other type is the external hemorrhoid, the type that comes out of the rectum. Piles, for those of you from the British side of the world, and the Indians also call it piles. So the main cause, though, is constipation. Dry, hard stools. That's it. Simple. Dry, hard stools. And then you strain, and then you leads to the hemorrhoid. Same with a fistula, which is a tear in your rectum, also from the same cause, dry, hard stools. So people, again, don't take constipation very seriously at all. I mean, they just ignore it, probably even more than the hemorrhoids. And they always say the same thing, when it comes to some of these conditions like constipation, they say the same thing. Oh, that's normal for me. Well, if you're not sleeping every night, people even will call that normal. You're urinating at night, they say that's normal for me. So, again, it's this accepting the health problem and then not calling it a health problem, but just calling it normal for you. So people do this 100% with constipation. I mean, I've had people who've had constipation their entire life, and they've just accepted it when it's so easily treatable. So that's what you have to do. You have to treat the constipation. So then we go look back. What is the cause of the constipation? Well, and this is a type of dry, hard constipation. It has to be hard. Can't just be kind of a sticky, kind of clogged constipation, which there is a type of this too. It won't usually create the hemorrhoid, even though you're constipated. It's dry, hard stools, basically, or some people call them golf balls. And then you're straining, and the same type of person sometimes is nervous and anxious, so they're impatient, and they strain, and then they create the hemorrhoid. And of course, once you start treating the hemorrhoid and change your diet, and you get soft stools, then of course it can start to heal. But you get one hard stool, you go right back to square one, and back to the bleeding hemorrhoid again, and then you have to start the whole treatment over. So the diet is essential. So we know that it's dry and hard stools. So what do you do instead of you have to do the opposite. The first treatment in Ayurveda is get rid of the cause. And then if we want to talk about, types of treatment, the first treatment is very simple. Do the opposite. Do the opposite. So if you're having dry, hard stools, then you don't want to eat any dry foods. Crackers, chips, even anything dry, toast, anything dry. Even we could say salads and some raw vegetables are kind of dry compared to a soup. So, but then the number one constipator after seeing, 5,000 patients by now is snacking on nuts. I would say 7 or 8 out of 10 of all my patients are snacking on nuts. And if not nuts, it's protein bars and crackers or chips. And this is, of course, North American patients. Europeans don't seem to have these same bad snacking habits. But So they're snacking on the nuts because they think nuts are good because they've been on some YouTube video watching some guys say they're good with magnesium. So now they're eating them all the time. They're also fattening. They also give you a belly. And and I always have to remind people I didn't say don't eat nuts. I just said don't snack on them. I mean, you want to cook a few nuts in your oatmeal and they're nice and soft. That's fine. It's the hardness and dryness that's a big problem. Rice crackers are very constipating, for example. It doesn't matter that they're organic. And even white rice is very constipating. So you want to get rid of all the things that are constipating, and dry foods are all constipating. Particularly, they're going to create the dry, hard stools. This is dry foods. Now, of course, as you've heard me say, and we know from, Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Hippocrates, just snacking on anything besides some fruit is never a good idea. That ruins your digestion, ruins your appetite, and can lead to constipation. So the real problem is the snacking, which North Americans are big snackers. Some people are just grazers. And of course, our human body, due to our anatomy, we can't graze. We need 3 or 4 hours to digest. So that just wrecks our whole digestion, usually creates either extreme depletion and weakness or weight gain, or even both. You're gaining weight and you're weak because you're just ruined your digestion system by grazing like the cow. He has 2 stomachs, so he can do it, or she can do it. So you got to stop the snacking. And the opposite is to, instead of this dry, what do you have instead that's not dry? You got to have juicy. So instead of these dry nuts and crackers for snacks that you or your kids may be having and making yourself constipated, you need to eat the juicy fruit, the blueberries, the strawberries, the grapes, the soaked raisins, the soaked prunes. You know, to have juicy, sweet fruit. You notice I didn't say dry fruit, because if you're constipated, you can't have dry fruit, even though it's fruit. So it has to be juicy. And in most cases, a little sweet's good. And most fruit is a laxative, with the exception of banana, can be a little constipating. So, because it's not juicy, there's no water dripping from the banana. And apples are a little bit dry. Technically, you got that crunchy, dry, hard feeling. They're not the best for constipation, even though they got a lot of fiber. You really want sweet and juicy blueberries, strawberries, grapes, of course, are a good laxative. So you start eating blueberries and strawberries in the day, a bowl of grapes at night, and stop the cookies and the crackers and the nuts and the chip bits. That may be enough to resolve your constipation, which you've had for 30, 40, 50 years, just by changing your eating habits. Now, many people, particularly Vata Prakriti type of thin, dry, cold person who's most susceptible to constipation and thus hemorrhoids, they shouldn't even have raw vegetables. People who are getting gas and bloating from any food, that's their body telling them they're not digesting it. So people are eating salads all the time, thinking this is healthy. And not to say that salad's not healthy, but if a lot of people just can't digest raw vegetables, just like babies can't digest raw vegetables, and 90-year-old people usually don't have the digestive capacity to eat salads anymore either. And certain people, Vata-dominant people who have born with kind of a weak digestion, also have trouble digesting raw vegetables. And of course, if you're thin and you're on the depleted side already, then, why are you eating salads, which is really good for weight loss and filling you up? You want to have soup, warm soup. So everything should be soupy. I tell people, just eat everything with a spoon. Never have dry rice, just like, you're picking it up with a chopstick. Like this Japanese rice, it's cakey and white. It's constipating. It's delicious, though. And white rice is a little sweeter, but we know there's many nutritional problems that result from just living off of white rice. According to Japanese history, they figured this out. But still, Japanese still do it. So we're not the only ones that just do things foolishly, even though the evidence is out that it's not a good idea. Many societies eat white rice with full knowledge it has no nutritional value. And white rice is very constipating because it has no fiber, no bran, so the fiber is very low. I wouldn't want to say no fiber, but no husk, so the fiber is low. And no germ, so in the middle, so there's no nutrition. And if you have it dry where you can pick it up with your chopsticks, then that's not good. So we just change it to soupy brown rice. That's what I mostly give, soupy brown rice with some spice and seasoning. Now, another cause of dry stools is low fat in the diet. Now, for the ladies, we try not to use the word fat, so we'll just say oil, insufficient oil. And many people, they think they're having enough oil, but I'm able to ask the questions. First, if you have dry, hard stools, I'm already susceptible. I'm already suspecting that you have insufficient oil in the diet. Other signs are just cracking joints. Other signs are very dry skin. These are all signs of low fat in the diet. Now, if you're dehydrated, your lips will be cracking and your mouth will be dry. That's dehydration for water. It's also a type of deficiency. So a person could be low and dehydrated. One of the biggest causes is just coffee because it's a diuretic. So, you have the person drinking coffee. So they got the dry lips, the dry mouth, the dry skin, drinking coffee, drying them out. And then they're having crackers, nuts, and chips and dry toast and dry rice. And, it's very obvious why they're constipated. I mean, I can just see from their intake form and their diet why they're constipated without even talking to them. I just may ask a few more questions to grill down. Like, do you have cracking joints? Yep. And a lot of times I'll ask them, do you crave oily foods like, butter? Yeah. See, so the body's even telling them to eat more oil, but they're not doing it. So people get this concept in their mind that they're eating enough oil. And of course, everybody's different. A thin person who's dry with dry, hard stools generally needs to start consuming more oil than they are. A person who's, heavier, overweight with oily skin needs to reduce down the oil that they're doing. So you can't say this is how much oil each person should take. And of course, a woman who's menstruating and losing blood, which when you lose blood, you don't just lose the iron, but you're losing the nutrients and the fat, the lipids in the blood. So that the menstruating woman needs to have more oil, more fat than a person or a man who's not menstruating. So there's a lot of factors to determine it, but in Ayurveda, we just look at the signs and symptoms. So we don't really care what the person thinks, what they're doing. It's irrelevant to us. I hate to say, we just say, we can, from diagnosis, we know this person is dry, dehydrated, and or low in oil, not consuming enough oil in their diet. And of course, this comes from bad information, coming from the past where they thought the low-fat diet was a good idea, but now they realize it was not a good idea. And our people have high cholesterol, so they become a little radical, and they just cut down the oil so much that can lead to constipation. Another cause of constipation is having insufficient fiber in the diet. And this can come from kind of your typical meat eater type of guy having bacon and hamburgers and steak and a lot of meat. And of course, my favorite fad diet, keto diet, is in this category. They don't have often sufficient fat because animal protein has zero fat. So it looks like it's, hefty. It's got a lot of protein, a lot of oil. Did I say it didn't have fat? No, I meant it didn't have fiber. It doesn't have fiber. It has high in fat, high in protein, and low in fiber. So generally, if you're overweight or a big person with constipation, we just get you off all the animal protein and just put you on beans, which are high fiber protein source. And that makes a big difference. And a lot of time people, and now of course, grains are not very popular, these days. They've been out of fad for a long time, out of popularity. Grain-free diet, another extreme diet. Well, grains have a lot of fiber, particularly brown rice and whole wheat bread. So people are leaving out this, and then they're leaving out, and then of course, now fruit's not too popular either these days because I guess the original carnivore didn't have much fruit, so people are leaving out the fruit. And fruit is great for your bowel movements and full of fiber and kind of has a strong laxative effect. So you get these people that are eating a lot of meat and animal protein, going to the gym, building muscles. They got a great six-pack, and then they're not pooping for a day or two. They're often taking laxatives or taking strong herbs. but they are the type that will end up with, not just fatty liver, gallbladder problems, probably tumors in the colon, but constipation and hemorrhoids. Yeah, constipation is a slow killer. You can start to have a cascading problems, and so you're having this low fiber diet and snacking on a lot of nuts and dry food, and you're constipated. So, I mean, hemorrhoids could be just the beginning of your health problems. Next, you could get polyps. Next, you could get growths. And of course, anytime you're constipated, even a day or two, you're kind of making a pocket or a diverticuli in the colon. And this eventually can lead to diverticulitis. So, when you have diverticulitis, it's also due to the constipation. And that can be very painful, and that can require surgery. And then, of course, ultimately, people who have colon cancer are those who'd had the constipation for 30, 40 years and thought it was normal. People with cancer, colon cancer, they've already had the history of the constipation, the diverticuli, the diverticulitis, and the hemorrhoids. They've done all that in the last 40 years. It's just now at the end, they get the cancer. Cancer is very slowly progressive, and you never want to ignore any health issue in your body because ultimately, in decades, it can develop into a more serious health issue. And that's definitely the case with hemorrhoids. So, just to review on the diet, soft, warm, soupy meals with extra fat or ghee in it, unless you happen to be overweight, oily skin. But these people are generally not going to get constipated, or at least not have the dry, hard stools. And stop all the snacking, have more fruit. That's like the first step. You've got to keep the bowels soft. And of course, I've treated hundreds of people for hemorrhoids, and they can get better, and then they come back in a couple years. In fact, I'd say 20, 30% of my clients are people coming back with the same problem 5 years later because they, like my staff have noticed, they forget everything in 5 years. They forget the diet. They forget all the things that they did 5 years earlier to get rid of the health problem, and they go back to the same habits. Or, they move, they remarry, their life changes, and they just start picking up a pack of new bad habits. But they do forget my advice after a couple of years, many people. And this is definitely the case with hemorrhoids. I've treated some people, 3, 4 times over 20 years for this hemorrhoid. And that's because they just stopped the diet. They went back to the crackers, the nuts. They got on YouTube. They started following a keto diet. They got constipated. They started following nuts are healthy. They just get sucked into this, YouTube health advice, and they start deviating from what I told him, which was kind of a simpler, soft, cooked, warm, soupy, oily meals, which made their stool soft, which kept their bowels going, which stopped the constipation, and then they end up with the hemorrhoids again. And when I'm talking to them, even just 2 years later, but definitely 4 or 5 years later, it's like I never spoke to them. They've forgotten everything. In fact, we're probably going to, if you're an old patient, we give you the returning client price, but we've spoke many times that, maybe after 2 years, we're going to have to give you the full client price because most people have forgotten everything, and I have to start over from scratch with the diet. So, very important to follow the diet if you're having constipation. Now, and the other good news is there's many herbal treatments that are very easy to use. And like I said in the beginning, you should be able to treat yourself by following the guidelines I just gave you. Stop the snacking, have more fruit, have more warm, soupy, oily foods, and then taking these herbs. And then you can treat yourself. You don't need the appointment. Let's take a look here. And we even have the hemorrhoid package right there for you, which really makes it kind of simple. Now, I wouldn't say this package is the exact same package for everybody. We're going to go through these. It's got the healing ghee, which you put topically on the hemorrhoid, which many people said worked better than any product they ever bought on Amazon, for example. Then you've got the hemorrhoid formula, which is the stool softener. And then I throw in one colon tea just to make sure these bowels keep moving. Because once you get the constipation, then you go right back to square one. People even think they're healed and haven't had a hemorrhoid for even months, and then they go fly in a plane where they don't move, they get to eat some don't they get dehydrated. Planes, people get constipated really easy, and then they have one straining stool, it bleeds, and they're right back at square one where they were 3 months earlier, and they have to start all over with buying the herbs again, following the diet again. So you really wanna make sure it's healed just because you haven't had symptoms. So let me show you these products here. This is the healing ghee. This is a traditional Ayurvedic formula. Well, ghee, we import it, we don't make it, and you can see if you know some of these herbs like neem, of course, is antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral. It's got licorice, which is soothing, and turmeric, little anti-inflammatory. Anantamul is sarsaparilla, and it's very soothing. It's used for dry skin. Haritaki is a laxative, but it's good for dry hard stools. Lodra is astringent, makes things tighten up and heal. And barberry is also for infection. And we use this for all types of things: cuts, ulcers, burns, insect bites, and even healing up the fissulas. It's called Jadiyati Grita in India, and we call it healing ghee here to make it all simple. But the main reason I give it out to people is for hemorrhoids. Even though when I travel, I carry it for cuts and wounds. I've put it on my animals, the cats, the dogs, the horse, the children. I carry it in my first aid kit, my herbal first aid kit, and I use it for a lot of things. But professionally, I'm selling it for hemorrhoids most of the time. And that's why it's in the hemorrhoid formula. It works very well, very, very effective. And look, it's 13 bucks. And it's good to have around because it's, like I said, it helps heal wounds very quickly. And it's very, very effective. It's one of these products that if people knew how beneficial it was, everybody would have it like I do, or I travel with it, have it in my first aid kit, and probably with the amount of animals I have, I'm probably using it on a weekly basis. So this is important. And like I said, many people said they tried multiple creams on Amazon and this worked better than anything. So that is that's a no-brainer there to get that. And then the next, of course, we have the hemorrhoid formula. And this one, of course, helps stop the bleeding too. Now, of course, we have bleeding hemorrhoids and non-bleeding hemorrhoids. And in fact, I can adjust these formulas if you did an appointment with me for a hemorrhoid that was bleeding, not bleeding. I mean, this particular formula is for bleeding. And if it was, I could adjust it. But for somebody who wasn't bleeding or somebody had heavy bleeding, the main herb that stops the bleeding is this herb called nakashar. And this is used for all types of bleeding conditions, even used for women's heavy menstrual bleeding. So it's very well-known formula. It's one of the ingredients in there. But basically, this is keeping the stool soft and reducing the hemorrhoid. That's right. And reducing it down. So we got to go through these herbs here. People always say, wow, that works so good. I can't believe it works so much better than anything I tried. You're a genius. I said, no, I'm not a genius. This is it. I've got it out of a book of old ancient formulas, which most of the formulas I'm getting them out of books of ancient formula because I studied as traditional Ayurvedic doctor. I didn't buy capsules in the United States. You can see I don't even like capsules. They don't work as well. We're putting actually notes for all patients now, telling them just don't order the capsules unless you really have to. Take it in the powder in its normal way. But let's look here at some of these herbs. And you may know aloe vera, very healing. And if you Just a home remedy would be you could put aloe vera straight on it too. You could drink aloe vera every day. Aloe vera drinking it, it's not a really powerful laxative, but if you drink enough of it, it is. And there's, of course, there's aloe vera inner leaf and there's aloe vera whole leaf. And the whole leaf, the skin has the laxative effect. Um, so drinking aloe vera would be a good idea. You may just have to drink a lot to really get the bowels moving. And then the next, we have the three herbs, Haritaki, Bupataki, Amlaki. And for those of you who are familiar with Ayurveda, that is these three herbs that make up Triphala. Now, many people think Triphala is for constipation, but it's not because it's too dry. And there's three herbs in there. Haritaki is the one that's for the dry, hard stools. And Bibataki is actually a little astringent, so it's not going to move your bowels at all. And then Amlaki is a little anti-inflammatory. There's this Triphala means three fruits, and these are three fruits, but just Triphala, or sometimes people say Triphala, is not a laxative at all. But it does clean the colon, and it does help soften the stools, and it has mild laxative effects. And then there's the Nakashar, which is just in there for the bleeding. And then we have this formula here, Kanchnar Guglu. I think it's about 16 herbs. It should say on there. It doesn't. Usually we put that down here, how many herbs are in it. It didn't say there. Usually should. But that is a traditional Ayurvedic formula used for growths, tumors, cysts, and that's the one that reduces down the hemorrhoid. See, so this is the traditional formula: Triphala, Kanchnar Guglu, aloe vera, some Nakashar. Now, there's one more interesting herb that was only in this formula and no other formula: alum. And alum's like a pure form of baking soda. It's a highly astringent powder. And it reduces the size of the hemorrhoids. In fact, it makes it shrink, and it helps stop bleeding. Now, there is a home remedy, and that is baking soda, like cold baking soda butt plunge. Yeah, I don't know what else to call it, but you get like a pan. You put some ice water in there with a couple big tablespoons of baking soda, and you sit in it with your butt, and that hemorrhoid will shrivel right up, and then you can put it back in. So that's used for external hemorrhoids, this baking soda, kind of cold baking soda butt bath. And in fact, we sell the alum in little jar all by itself. It's very inexpensive. It should be part of this package, but I don't know. We chose not to include it because it's not necessary, but it is. If for external hemorrhoids, it's very valuable because it can get the hemorrhoid right back in almost immediately. And some people have just made this alum into a little paste and just put it on the hemorrhoid, and it just shrivels it right up. If you touch it to your mouth, you can even feel your mouth kind of shrivel up. It just dries out, shrivels up your tongue. And kind of like a baking soda. It's type of a medical grade baking soda, we could call it, bicarbonate. But people do this. If you go look online, this baking soda butt bath is known. Now, so you need the ghee, you need the hemorrhoid formula to soften the stools, but this is still not and to reduce the hemorrhoid and stop the bleeding. This is obviously the most important formula. And those two are essential. And then after that, you really have to have usually one colon formula just to make sure the bowels are going, because you don't want any constipation at all. So in the package, the hemorrhoid package, I put in the tea. Where'd it go? The tea. Oh, there it is here. I put in the colon cleanse tea because it's easy to take. Doesn't taste bad. It's got the peppermint in it. You don't want to take senna all by itself. We see people even selling senna all by itself in little capsules. It's too strong. It'll make your hemorrhoid worse. And even Carsata sagrada, it's too strong. But people say, but, Khabir, I see you put senna and Carsata sagrada in these, but it's not big amounts. See, that's the trick. I'm using, I just put I think there's 15% senna, 20% Carsata sagrada, South American herbs. So I put in these two laxatives, And then I soften up the whole formula by putting in these carminative herbs, um, licorice, fennel, cumin, and ginger. So that helps with the digestion. That avoids the cramping, the discomfort. And then it's in a base of peppermint, which, is also helping the digestion. So that's why it says very effective without the cramping. Never take senna all by itself, particularly if you have irritable bowel or hemorrhoids. It's just too strong. You're going to get a violent reaction. Small amounts of senna with these other herbs like, licorice, fennel, ginger, and cumin, that's a much wiser herbalist. You can always see a poor herbalist. They use the kind of kitchen sink method, and we can see many products, most online. I can look at the formula and know there's no trained herbalist behind it. They just pick every uh, um, they just pick every laxative that they can find online. Senna, Carsata Sagrada, aloe vera whole leaf, or rhubarb, and cayenne pepper, and just throw it all in a capsule. And sure, it's going to make you go, but that is not a professional formula. Everything should be balanced. Every herb shouldn't be just for that main condition. That's how you can tell they're amateur, because they just throw in five, six things to try to treat it when they really don't understand these individual herbs. They don't know how much to use, and they don't really know them well enough. Like, I know senna, I know Carsata Sagrada, and I know I would only want to use like 10-20% in a formula of each at the most. And I know which herbs I need to balance it out so you don't get the adverse effects, which is cramping and more kind of violent loose stools. It's, you have to adjust it. So I usually give this colon tea is what I give in the package, but sometimes I just give this long-term colon care. Say they're having one bowel movement a day, and I know that this hemorrhoid form is also going to move the bowels to some degree. But remember, it's not really for constipation; it's just to soften it up. So a lot of times I have to support it with another formula. The best one for the dry, hard stools in the Vata person is this one. This one is for dry constipation. This is the one made for it. And of course, the main herb in here, if you get into looking at the herbs, is haritaki in dried castor oil. So we call it Enron haritaki. Enron means castor oil. So that's the main ingredient. And again, it's got the Triphala, Bibataki, haritaki. So it is got Triphala in it. So it's really Triphala in castor oil. And again, some herbs to kind of soften it up, like the licorice and ginger to warm it up. Little Carsata Sagrada is probably only 5% Carsata Sagrada in there. Just give it an extra kick. And the Vidanga is an anti-parasitical herb, because traditionally, all herbal formulas in Ayurveda have a little bit of Vidanga for parasites. It's just traditional. I'm a traditional guy following tradition here. So that's the one of the more common ones I would use instead of the tea. But often we'll throw the tea along, because if they forget to take it at night, they can take the tea in the day and get rid of the constipation. Now, some people, where they're big and heavy, large-sized person with a big, giant, protruding hemorrhoid, I may throw in this lymph detox formula to take at night. And it says right there, see, also softens stools. And it's very strong. This is and reduces belly fat. Oh, it says right there, hemorrhoids. I didn't even realize when I pulled this up that it was going to say that, but I do use this. I'll give this at night. So if it's a serious case or an overweight person, because it's a strong formula. If they're thin, dry stools, then I prefer this one. If they're not really that constipated, then I give this long-term one. And if they're big, heavy, overweight kapha, then I'll throw in this one here. We call it lymph detox, but in fact, it's very strong and it's good. It's because the guggulu, and the guggulu is the key ingredient that breaks things down. And there you go. You can see the haritaki, bibataki, and amlaki again with a little guggulu and pipali, which means sweet, long pepper. All right. Now, I did realize that, so you got to pick the right herbs. You got to change the diet. Still should be individualized. You got to pick the right colon formula. The healing ghee is a necessity. The hemorrhoid formula is a necessity, and then the colon formula has to be picked individually based on your case. That's why I showed you a few different choices. Now, I did forget to tell you there's one other thing, classification of foods that will make your hemorrhoid worse and can cause it. And it's usually that type that gets the loose stools, and that is chili pepper, cayenne pepper. And unfortunately, people even sell laxatives with cayenne pepper. This is not a good idea, even though it has a laxative quality to it. I mean, maybe certain people who are big and heavy and overweight could deal with that cayenne pepper, but for many people, it will make the hemorrhoid bleed more. Even women notice that, when they're menstruating, if they have too much chili pepper, it thins their blood and makes them bleed more. But this chili pepper, not only is it thin in your blood, which if you go look at my blood thinning formula, I put a little chili pepper in there, but it's just a small, like 2%. You just need a little bit. Um, but in the case of hemorrhoid, chili pepper has what they call in Ayurveda a penetrating quality. It means it penetrates things, which, there can be value in that, and thinning and breaking. So it's penetrate and make the hemorrhoid bleed again. Now, many people told me they didn't have hemorrhoid. The hemorrhoids went away after my treatment, usually right away. I mean, you start following that. You're not going to get the hemorrhoid if you're following the diet, getting soft stools, and your stools are soft. You're not going to have the hemorrhoid pain. It may not take you another week, or 2-3 weeks or a month to heal it by putting the ghee on, but as long as you don't have hard stools, it's going to heal 100%. But since you've already had the condition once, 5 years down the road, you could have a spicy hot meal and get your hemorrhoids right back again. And I've seen that many times. So you really want to avoid hot, spicy chili peppers. You want the warm foods and the warm soups, soft, oily, and warm. See, I mentioned warm a few times. You don't want cold. Cold is constipating. Salads are cold in most cases. Smoothies can also be a big problem because of their cold and their bad food combining. I've spoke on that many times. So I hope that helped you to realize that having hemorrhoids is not normal, not a good idea, and easy to treat. All right. I hope this helps you. And if you need assistance and you have other health complications as well, and you just like somebody to help you pick the right products, please feel free to do an appointment with me, and I will assist you and guide you properly and give you an individualized diet and pick the products exactly for you. Otherwise, I would at least try to treat it on your own. I wish you all the best of health and happiness and longevity. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.